I want to speak to you today about something profound, something that might change the way you view the struggles, the trials, and yes, the wilderness seasons of your life. We've all been there, haven't we? In a place where nothing seems to make sense, a place where the road ahead seems to stretch out, dark and uncertain. We call it the wilderness. But I'm here to tell you that even in the wilderness, there are angels waiting to show up and walk with you. Let me start by acknowledging the reality that wilderness seasons are inevitable. There's no one in this room who hasn't had a time when everything seemed to fall apart. You may be in that wilderness now. The wilderness is not just a place of hardship, it's a place of testing. It's where God refines you, sharpens you, and prepares you for the destiny He has planned for you. It's uncomfortable, it's lonely, it's heaven, or perhaps it is a temporary piece of who your future can be. It's painful, but understand this, the wilderness is not the end of the story. In the midst of those moments of darkness and confusion, there is something powerful happening. Because while you're walking through the wilderness, you are not walking alone. God has a way of sending messengers, angels, who are strategically placed in your life. You may not always recognize them at first, but they are there. Angels don't always look like wings and halos. Sometimes they show up as people who bring you a word of encouragement when you're ready to give up. Sometimes they come in the form of circumstances that shift when you least expect it. Sometimes angels show up in your heart, whispering a promise of hope and reminding you that God is still in control. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how can I see the angels when I feel so lost? You see, that's the trick of the wilderness. It's designed to make you feel isolated. It's designed to make you believe that there is no one out there, no one who understands, no one who can help. But hear me clearly, the angels are always there. They are often sent when you feel most alone. You may not see them with your eyes, but if you listen closely, you'll feel their presence in ways that stir your soul. When you think of angels, you might think of grand, glorious moments, mountains moving, seas parting. But sometimes angels come quietly in the form of a phone call from a friend who hasn't spoken to you in years. Or maybe an unexpected blessing shows up when you're about to lose all hope. Those angels, those divine messengers, are sent to remind you that God's provision never fails. Even in the wilderness, you are not forgotten. And let me tell you this, the wilderness is not a waste. We often think that the wilderness is just something we need to survive to get through. But the truth is, the wilderness is a place of transformation. It's where faith is refined and strength is built. It's where you realize that your calling, your purpose is still in place even when the world around you seems to crumble. If you can see past the dryness, past the struggle, you will find that God is using that very place to shape you into who you are meant to be. I know many of you are walking through tough times, but let me remind you, you are not alone. The angels in your wilderness are not just there to show you the way. They're there to walk with you, to protect you, and to encourage you. Maybe they show up as people who help you in your time of need. Maybe they show up as words that inspire you when you're ready to give up. But I want you to open your eyes, open your heart. There are angels walking beside you, even in the darkest places. And here's the challenge for you today. When you're in the wilderness, don't just focus on the struggle. Look for the angels. Look for the people God sends to remind you that He is with you. Look for the signs of His provision that are all around you. You might just find that the wilderness isn't as desolate as you thought. Maybe it's a place where the angels are teaching you, guiding you, and strengthening you to be who God has called you to be. So whatever your wilderness looks like today, know this, there are angels in your wilderness. They're not far away. They're right there waiting for you to open your eyes and see that God is with you always. And you will come out of this wilderness stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the blessings that lie ahead. Thank you. The wilderness is a place that many of us would rather avoid, but it is also a place we all find ourselves in at some point in life. It's a space where we feel isolated, where the familiar is stripped away and we're forced to face the reality of who we are without the comforts and distractions that usually help us navigate life. The wilderness is often seen as a place of struggle, a space where we are tested beyond what we think we can bear. And yet it is in these moments of discomfort that our true character is forged. The wilderness doesn't just come to harm us, it comes to refine us. We may think that the wilderness is meant to break us, but the truth is, it is here where we learn to rely on something greater than ourselves, where we come face to face with our weaknesses, and where we are humbled enough to recognize our need for divine intervention. When the path ahead is unclear and when the world around us feels like it's falling apart, that's when the wilderness becomes a mirror to our souls. It exposes everything that is hidden, our doubts, our fears, our insecurities, but it also brings forth a deeper sense of strength and faith that we might not have known we had. It's easy to think that wilderness seasons are simply times of suffering or punishment, but in reality, the wilderness is one of the most powerful opportunities for growth. It's a place where the distractions are removed, where we can hear God's voice more clearly, and where He does some of His best work in shaping us. Even though it's uncomfortable, the wilderness is not a dead end. It's a place where God often shows us His deepest truths, where He tests our faith, and where He prepares us for greater things. So while it may feel like a place of isolation or hardship, the wilderness is also a place of potential. It's a place where we discover who we truly are and where God's transformative power works its deepest miracles. Angels are often misunderstood or romanticized as mystical, otherworldly beings, but in the context of our everyday lives, they are much more than that. Angels, in their most profound form, are messengers of divine intervention. They are sent by God to guide us, protect us, and reassure us when we feel most alone. The wilderness, with all its challenges and discomfort, is often the very place where we need angelic assistance the most. But here's the thing, angels don't always come in the form we expect. We tend to envision angels as beings with wings and halos descending from the heavens in dramatic moments. However, the angels in our lives often show up in far subtler, yet equally powerful ways. Sometimes they appear as people. An unexpected friend who reaches out when you feel like you're sinking, a stranger who offers a kind word just when you need it, or a mentor who gives you the advice that shifts the entire trajectory of your life. These are not random occurrences. These are divine interventions, angelic moments wrapped in human form. The challenge for many of us, especially in the wilderness, is that we may not recognize these angels at first. We may dismiss the signs, ignore the help, or fail to see the subtle ways in which God is sending His messengers. But if we open our eyes and hearts, we begin to realize that God's angels aren't just some distant, ethereal beings. They are present in the moments when we are vulnerable, when we are on the brink of giving up, when we are questioning the purpose of our journey. Angels show up in ways that remind us of God's love and care for us. They are the whispered words of encouragement that spark hope when the fire seems to have died out. They are the phone calls, the texts, the letters, the chance encounters that arrive at exactly the right time, reminding us that we are not forgotten, even when we feel abandoned. These messengers are the instruments God uses to bring light into our darkest time in the wilderness. They often speak words of hope, reminding us that the struggles we face are temporary, that there is more beyond this moment, and that we are not alone. So the next time you find yourself in a difficult place, recognize that angels may be closer than you think. They are not always visible in the way we expect, but they are always present, sent by God to help us through the challenges of the wilderness. The key is to be open to recognizing them, to being aware of the unexpected help, the divine moments, and the people who are placed in your path when you least expect it. These are the angels who walk with you, even when you can't see them. When we find ourselves in the wilderness, it often feels like God is distant, as though He has abandoned us to face our struggles alone. The darkness of the moment can make it hard to believe that He is present, especially when we're wrestling with pain, uncertainty, or confusion. But the truth is, God's presence never leaves us, even when it feels like He's silent or hidden. It is in these moments that we are challenged to dig deeper into our faith, to trust not just in what we see or feel, but in the promises He has made. Even when we can't sense His presence, He is still with us, holding us in ways that go beyond our understanding. God's presence doesn't always come in the form we expect. We might be looking for a dramatic sign, a sudden miracle, or a loud voice to guide us out of our struggles. However, more often than not, God's presence comes quietly in the small, subtle moments. It's in the peace that comes unexpectedly in the midst of turmoil, in the stillness that surrounds us when we finally pause long enough to hear His voice. It's in the quiet strength He gives us to keep moving forward, even when we feel like we can't take another step. Sometimes God's presence is felt through the people He places in our lives. Those who show up with a word of encouragement when we're at our lowest. Those who walk alongside us and remind us that we're not alone. But even if no one else is around, God is still with us. It's in those moments when we feel abandoned that we realize that God's presence is not just about external circumstances or the people around us. It's about His Spirit, which dwells within us, guiding us, comforting us, and giving us the strength to face the challenges before us. We might not always understand why we go through the wilderness or why God allows us to experience seasons of hardship and confusion, but we can trust that He is present in those moments, working behind the scenes even when we can't see it. His presence doesn't depend on our feelings or our understanding. It's constant, steady, and unshakable. And in the wilderness, it's often through the silence, the stillness, and the struggle that we grow closest to Him. In our weakest moments, He is strengthening our faith, refining our hearts, and preparing us for the next step in our journey. So even when you can't feel Him, even when it seems like God is far away, remember that His presence is always there. The wilderness may be a place of testing, but it is also a place where God reveals Himself in deeper, more intimate ways. Hold on to the truth that you are never truly alone, because God is right there with you, even in the wilderness. Even in the wilderness, when everything seems barren and lost, God's provision is always present. It may not always appear in the form we expect or at the exact moment we desire, but God is always faithful to meet our needs, even in the most difficult seasons of life. The wilderness is often a place where we feel stripped of everything we once relied on, whether it's our resources, our comfort, or our security. But in those very moments of lack, God has a way of showing up and providing in ways that deepen our trust in Him and teach us to rely on His sufficiency. We may think that God's provision only comes through the abundance we can see, money, success, or material comfort. But God's provision is much deeper than that. It's in the moments when we have nothing left but our faith, and yet we find the strength to keep moving forward. It's in the quiet reassurance that even when the way seems unclear, God is guiding us. It's in the unexpected phone call, the encouraging word, or the small miracle that reminds us we are not forgotten. These are the provisions that sustain us when we feel like we're running on empty. Sometimes God's provision comes in the form of people who show up at just the right time to offer support, encouragement, or practical help. It's in the person who provides a meal when you're struggling to make ends meet, or the friend who offers a listening ear when you're weighed down by burdens you can't carry alone. These are not coincidences. They are divine provisions sent by God to remind us that He sees us and that He will always make a way, even in the wilderness. Other times, provision comes in the form of the inner strength we never knew we had. When you're walking through a wilderness experience and you feel like giving up, God's provision is the quiet resilience that rises within you, the grace that allows you to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when you don't know how much longer you can hold on. In those moments of emotional and spiritual exhaustion, God's provision is not always a dramatic change in circumstances. It's the quiet power that He gives us to endure and to trust that He is working even when we can't see the outcome. The wilderness is a place where we learn that God's provision is not just about meeting our immediate needs, but about shaping our hearts and minds to depend more fully on Him. We begin to understand that His provision is not always about abundance in the way the world defines it, but about sufficiency in the midst of scarcity. It's about learning to trust that He will provide exactly what we need, even when we don't see how or when it will come. And perhaps one of the most powerful aspects of God's provision in the wilderness is that it often prepares us for the next chapter of our journey. The lessons we learn about trusting Him in the desert are the very ones that equip us for the next season of our lives. Every time God provides in the wilderness, whether it's through people, circumstances, or that still small voice, we are being strengthened, refined, and prepared to step into the future He has for us. So even when it feels like you're walking through a dry and barren place, remember this: God is never absent from your need. His provision may not always come in the way you imagine, but it will always come in the way that is best for you. Trust that He is working behind the scenes and that His provision in the wilderness is exactly what you need to endure and to grow. The wilderness is often viewed as a place of struggle and hardship, a time of difficulty that we must simply endure. But what if we could see it as something more? What if we could understand that the wilderness isn't just a season of suffering, it's a place of transformation, a space where God is doing something deep and lasting in us. The wilderness isn't just a test of endurance, it's a divine opportunity for growth and change. In the wilderness, we are shaped, refined, and prepared for the next season of our lives. When we're in the wilderness, it's easy to focus only on what is wrong. We can get caught up in the lack, the struggle, the uncertainty. But if we shift our perspective, we can begin to see that the wilderness is not a punishment, but a process of preparation. It's a space where God is refining our character, strengthening our faith, and deepening our trust in Him. Just as gold is purified through fire, we too are purified through the trials of the wilderness. It's in the moments when we are pressed to our limits that God can work in ways that He cannot in times of ease and comfort. This transformation isn't always immediate. It often requires patience, perseverance, and trust. We may not always understand why we have to go through the wilderness, but we can trust that it is never without purpose. The wilderness strips away the excess, the distractions, and the things that keep us from fully depending on God. It's in this space that we discover who we really are, the person God has been shaping us to be all along. We may uncover hidden strengths we didn't know we had, or discover new gifts and callings that we couldn't see before. The wilderness is the place where God prepares us for the future He has planned, equipping us with the resilience and wisdom we need to step into the next chapter. Moreover, the wilderness is a place where we often gain clarity about our true calling. When everything else is stripped away, we are left with a raw and unfiltered version of ourselves. This can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it's in these moments of vulnerability that we become open to the direction God is leading us. Our distractions fade, and we are forced to confront what truly matters. The wilderness is where God often reveals the deeper desires of our heart, calling us to align more closely with His purpose for our lives. It is here that we begin to realize that our struggles aren't just about us. They are preparing us to help others, to live out a greater purpose, and to walk in a deeper understanding of who God has called us to be. The wilderness may be an uncomfortable place, but it is never wasted. Every step, every hardship, every moment of doubt is a part of the process that leads us to transformation. As we go through the wilderness, we are being made into something new, a more faithful, more trusting, more resilient version of ourselves. The wilderness may be hard, but it is also sacred. It is a place where we are prepared for the promises that lie ahead. When you find yourself in the wilderness, don't just ask God to remove the difficulty. Ask Him to reveal what He is teaching you in the midst of it. Ask Him to show you what He is refining in you and how He is preparing you for what's next. The wilderness is not the end of your story. It's the place where your story is being written, where God is doing something in you that will not only carry you through the present, but also propel you into the future He has for you. Trust that God is working, even when you can't see it, and know that every trial has the potential to transform you into who you are meant to become. In the midst of our wilderness experiences, it's easy to feel like we are walking a path completely alone. The struggles we face can make us feel isolated, and at times it seems as though no one truly understands the weight of what we're carrying. But here's the truth: we are never alone. Even in our darkest, most difficult moments, God is working through the people around us, those who He places in our lives as angels to walk with us, to encourage us, and to show us that there is still hope. The angels in your wilderness may not be what you expect, but they are always there waiting for you to see them. These angels may come in many different forms. Sometimes they show up as the people closest to us. Friends, family, mentors who offer words of comfort, who pray with us, or who simply sit in silence beside us when we don't have the strength to speak. They are the ones who, even when they don't have all the answers, remind us that we don't have to go through this alone. Sometimes these angels are strangers, people we might never have met under normal circumstances, yet who arrive at the perfect moment with an unexpected kindness, an encouraging word, or a simple act of generosity. These moments of human connection remind us that God is still present in the world, working through people to bring us the help and strength we need. But angels don't only come in the form of people. They can also show up in our circumstances, in the quiet moments of our lives, when we least expect it. It might be the moment when we find a solution to a problem that seemed insurmountable, or when an opportunity opens up right when we thought all doors were closed. The angels in our wilderness are the signs and wonders. They are in the unexpected blessings that come when we need them the most. The phone call that brings reassurance, the small provision that lets us breathe just a little easier. God uses these moments to remind us that His presence and care are all around us, even when we can't see them clearly. But recognizing these angels requires us to change our perspective. The wilderness can make us so fixated on our pain, our fear, and our sense of loss that we fail to see the people, the moments, and the divine interventions that are sent to help us through. We have to open our eyes to the ways that God is working in our lives, often through others, to provide us with exactly what we need. The angels in your wilderness are not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they are soft whispers, quiet encouragements, or small, seemingly insignificant acts of kindness. But these angels are just as real and just as important as any grand miracle. In a world that often pushes us to rely solely on ourselves, God reminds us through these angels that we were never meant to walk alone. We are created for community, and even in the wilderness, we are meant to lean on one another. The angels he sends into our lives are there not just to carry us, but to remind us that we are part of something larger than ourselves. They are God's tangible presence in a broken world, showing us that his love and care are often delivered through the people he places in our path. So when you're walking through the wilderness, don't just look for the miraculous signs or wait for the storm to pass. Look around you. Open your heart to the angels that are present, whether they are the people who offer a hand, the unexpected help that arrives just when you need it, or the quiet reminders of God's provision and love. These angels may be unseen by the world, but they are always felt, and they are always sent to remind you that you are never truly alone. You are surrounded by God's love, his people, and his provision, even in the wilderness. Trust that when you need it most, the angels in your wilderness will appear, carrying you toward the promise of what lies beyond. As we close today, I want you to carry with you this one truth. The wilderness is not the end of your story. It's not a place where you are abandoned or left to struggle in isolation. In fact, it's the very place where God is working in ways that you may not yet see. The wilderness is where your faith is tested, but it is also where your character is built, where you are transformed, and where God's provision and his angels walk with you every step of the way. In the midst of the trials, there are angels, divine messengers sent by God in the form of people, moments, and even quiet reassurances that remind you that you are never alone. Even when the road is tough, even when you can't feel his presence, God is right there, always working on your behalf. His provision may not come as you expect, but it will always be exactly what you need. And know this, everything you're going through is preparing you for something greater. The wilderness is shaping you, refining you, and strengthening you for the future that God has in store. So when you find yourself in the wilderness, whether you're there now or when you face it in the future, open your eyes to the angels all around you. Trust that God is with you, that he is providing, and that he is transforming you in this very season. The wilderness might be hard, but it is not a place of defeat. It is a place of preparation. And when you emerge, you will be stronger, wiser, and more equipped to walk in the purpose God has called you to fulfill. Thank you. Thank you.